Today's story is an urban legend circulating on Japanese forums. Hachisha-sama is somewhat similar to the American Slender Man. Will stalk children or teenagers and then seek to capture or harm them. But Hachisha-sama appears as a woman. Some say it is a woman or old woman wearing mourning clothes or a one-piece dress. The appearance is not certain, but it must be very tall, about 2 meters. And will make a sound like a stuffy throat. Sounds that make people feel sick, like bababo. It could even be said that this Hachishakusama was born as early as the Yomon period in Japan. That is, 5,000 or even 10,000 years ago. In the ancient existence of worship, primitive people sacrificed boys to him. Come and pray for the safety of the whole village or a good harvest. But Hachisha-sama himself has no good or evil qualities. He is simply following the traditions of ancient times. But now no one is sacrificing boys, so he comes to find them himself. Even if he gets nothing, he will leave and won't cause trouble again. As the story goes, I returned to my father's farmhouse in my hometown during the summer vacation. My father's hometown is about 2 hours drive away from home. Although it is a farmhouse, I like the atmosphere very much. After I entered high school, I often rode my motorcycle there alone during summer or winter vacations. Grandpa and Grandma also said finally here and greeted me happily. However, the last time I went there was before I was about to enter my senior year of high school, and I haven't been there for 10 years now. Is such that it was just spring break and the weather was nice, so I rode my motorcycle to my grandpa's house. Although it was still very cold, the warmth on the edge made me feel comfortable, so I rested there. Then, Bobo, wave, wave, wave. I heard a strange sound that seemed like wave, wave, wave. It was not the sound of a machine, but the sound of a human being. I was just trying to figure out what the sound was when I saw a hat appear on the hedge in the yard. That's not a hat on top. The hat moved slowly to the side until I came to where the fence ended and I saw a woman. It turned out to be the woman wearing the hat. She is wearing a white dress. But the height of the hedgerow is 2 meters. The head peeking out from the hedge showed how tall she was. To my surprise, she moved again and then left my sight, and the hat disappeared. Even the sound of ba, ba, ba that started at some point has disappeared. At that time, I only thought that she might be a man who was already very tall and wore super thick-soled boots, or a man who dressed up as a woman and wore high heels. Afterwards, I talked about it with my grandparents while drinking tea in the living room. I just saw a very tall girl. I don't know if she is a man disguised as a woman. Even when they heard me say this, they just responded with a faint "that's it." It's taller than the fence, and it makes a strange sound like pop, wave, wave while wearing a hat. When I said this, my grandparents stopped moving. No, it stopped very suddenly. Then Grandpa seemed to be angry and started to ask a series of questions. When did you see it? Where did you see it? How high is it above the fence? I was shocked by my grandfather's aura. After answering those questions, my grandfather suddenly went to the phone in the corridor without saying a word. I didn't know who to call. Because of the sliding door, I couldn't hear clearly what was said. Grandma was trembling as if she had lost her soul. Grandpa came back after talking on the phone. You will stay here today. No, it should be said that I can't let you go back today. I don't know if I did something wrong. I thought hard, but nothing came to my mind. Even what happened to that woman was not something I ran over to see, it was the other person who showed up. Honey, I'll trouble you later. I'll pick up Granny K. After Grandpa left these words, he drove out in the pickup truck. I asked my grandma tremblingly what happened. "You're stuck with Master Hachisha. But Grandpa will find a way, so you don't have to worry," Grandma said in a trembling voice. Then, during the period before Grandpa came back, Grandma began to talk about Master Hachishaku. It turns out that there is an ominous creature in this area called Hachishakusama. Hachishakusama looks like a tall woman. She is 8 feet tall as her name suggests, and she makes a strange laughter like bababo that resembles a man's. According to different witnesses, she is sometimes a young woman in mourning clothes, sometimes an old woman in a short-sleeved kimono, sometimes a middle-aged woman in field work clothes, but in any case, the unusually tall woman wears a hat and makes a creepy noise. Laughter is the same. There were rumors in the past that it came to possess travelers, but the actual situation was unclear. This area was sealed by Kasidagarba, so she could not leave the village. Once caught by Master Hachisha, he will be killed within a few days. It had been about 15 years since the last person killed by Hachisha-sama. Although I later heard that the so-called being sealed by Kasidagarbo means that although I don't know why Hachishakusama can reach the outside through certain roads, setting up Kasidagarbo Bodhisattva on those roads can restrict Hachishakusama. Therefore, they are set up everywhere in the southeast, northwest, and northwest of the village boundary. However, why the villagers accepted the sealing of Lord Baki in their own village seems to be because they have reached certain agreements with the surrounding villages, such as water conservancy priorities. The Hachisha-sama incident only happens once every few years to decades, so people in the past may have thought this agreement was a good deal. Even if I heard something like this, I didn't think it was true at all. I think it's the same for everyone. Then Grandpa came back with an old woman. Something really extraordinary happened. "Now please take this." The old man named Granny K said so and gave me an amulet. Then she and her grandfather went to the second floor and didn't know what they did. Grandma, on the other hand, stayed with me, even when I went to the toilet, and wouldn't let me close the toilet door. With things like this, things must be really big. After some time, I was called up to the second floor and entered a room. All the windows there were covered with newspapers. Not only that, but also talismans, and piles of salt were set up at the 4 corners. In addition, there is a wooden box with a small Buddha statue on it. Also, I don't know where they got 2 small bedpans. They said they were for my convenience. It's getting dark. Listen up, you can't leave here until dawn tomorrow. Grandma and I want to call you or talk to you. By the way, you must not leave here before 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Come out on your own after 7 o'clock. I will help you tell your family first. Grandpa said seriously, and I nodded silently. Please be sure to abide by what Grandpa said. Take the amulet with you, and if anything happens, please go to the Buddha and pray. Grandma K also said the same thing. They said I could watch TV, so they turned on the TV for me, but I was too distracted to watch TV. When I was locked in the room, my grandma prepared rice balls and snacks, but I was not in the mood to eat them at all, so I just left them wrapped in a quilt, shivering. I don't know when I fell asleep. When I opened my eyes again, the TV was playing a night program. I forgot what program it was. I looked at my watch and it was 1 a.m. It's really annoying to wake up at this time. As I was thinking this, I suddenly heard a tapping sound on the window. It wasn't the sound of pebbles hitting each other, but the sound of tapping lightly with my hands. But it also sounded like the wind was making the windows rattle. I couldn't tell what the sound was. I could only desperately think it was the wind. In order to calm down, I took a sip of tea, but I still felt terrible, so I turned up the sound of the TV and forced myself to watch TV. At this moment, I heard my grandpa's voice. "Hello, are you okay? If you feel scared, don't force it." I approached the door without hesitation, but then I suddenly remembered what my grandfather said before. "What's the matter? It doesn't matter if you come here." It does sound like Grandpa's voice, but it's not Grandpa's voice. Although I don't know why, I got goosebumps all over my body when I noticed it. Suddenly I saw the pile of salt in the corner, and it turned black. I immediately sat down in front of the Buddha statue, held the amulet tightly and prayed desperately, "Please save me." At this time, I heard the sound of bababo and the sound of dong dong and dong dong coming from the window. Although I knew she was not that tall, I still pictured her reaching out from below to knock on the window. The only thing I could do was pray to the Buddha statue. The night felt very long, but I finally made it to morning, and the TV that had been on all the time began to play the morning news without even realizing it. The time displayed on the corner of the screen was 7:13. The tapping on the window and the sound from last night also stopped unconsciously. It seems that I may have fallen asleep or lost my mind during the process. The salt pile has turned completely black. Just in case, I looked at my watch and it was indeed the same time. I opened the door cautiously and saw my grandma and Grandma K looking worried. Grandma shed tears and said, "It's so wonderful." After going downstairs, my father came too. Grandpa was outside the gate saying, "Get in the car." I walked to the courtyard and saw that there was a box truck that came from nowhere, and several men. The van was a 9-seater, and I was asked to sit in the middle. Mother-in-law K sat in the passenger seat. All the men in the courtyard got in the car. There were 9 people in total, and I was surrounded on all sides. The uncle sitting on the right, who was about 50 years old, said, "What an incredible thing. Although you may care, close your eyes and put your head down. Even though we can't see it, you probably can. Don't open your eyes again until I say it's okay." Then, the minivan driven by Grandpa took the lead, our boxcar followed in the middle, and behind was the car driven by Dad, and they set off in a row. The speed of the convoy was very slow, probably only about 20 kilometers per hour. Not long after, Grandma K muttered, "Now is the critical moment," and began to recite the incantation. "Bobo wave." I heard that voice again. I held the amulet that Granny K gave me tightly. Although my eyes were closed and my head was facing down, I still opened my eyes a little and accidentally saw the outside of the car. What caught her eye was a white dress, and it was moving at the speed of the car. Was she following with long strides? Her head was not visible from the window, but she seemed to be planning to peek into the car and began to bend down. I gasped unconsciously. "Don't look!" the person next to me snapped. I closed my eyes tightly in panic and held the amulet in my hand tighter. Knock, knock, knock. There was a tapping sound on the car window. Everyone around me said "eh" and "ah." Even though everyone couldn't see or hear her voice, they all seemed to hear the sound of the window being knocked. Grandma K recited the mantra more intently. After a while, the sound and the tapping disappeared. Grandma K said, "Successfully escaped." Others who had been holding their breath also said with relief, "That's great." Later, the car stopped on a wide road and I switched to my father's car. While Dad and Grandpa were thanking the others, Grandma K came over and said, "Show me the amulet." I looked at the amulet I had been holding tightly and saw that it was all black. "I think it should be fine." but just in case, please carry this with you during this period. Grandma K gave me a new amulet. After that, my father and I returned to our home. A few days later, my grandfather and nearby neighbors delivered my motorcycle. Dad seemed to know about Hachisha-sama. He told me that when he was a child, his friend was entangled by Hachisha-sama and lost his life. There are also people who quickly run away to live elsewhere after being entangled. All the men on the boxcar are relatives from my grandfather's side. In other words, no matter how thin the blood relationship is, they are all related to me by blood. The leading grandfather and the father following behind are not to mention direct blood relatives, which can somewhat confuse the 8-foot Sama. The reason why I asked my grandfather's relatives to help was because my uncle couldn't come overnight, so I asked someone with a weak blood relationship who could come immediately. Even so, it was impossible to gather 7 men at once, and it was safer during the day than at night, so I was locked in the room for the whole night. During the journey, they even realized that if anything happens, my grandfather or father will be my substitute. After that, as I said before, I was told repeatedly not to go to Grandpa's place again. After I got home, I called my grandfather and asked him if he had spoken to me that night, but my grandfather was very sure that he had not spoken to me at all that night. As expected, that voice was. Thinking of this sent chills down my spine. It is said that Hachisha-sama is looking for pre-adult teenagers or children. When a child or teenager is in a state of extreme anxiety, she will pretend to be the voice of someone around her and talk to you, causing you to unknowingly let down your guard. 10 years passed after that, and the incident was no longer so fresh in my memory, so I was finally able to talk about it. Later, Grandma called and said, "The Fictitious who sealed Lord Hachishaku was destroyed. Maybe she will come to your house." To this day I still tell myself it's just a superstition, but I'm still very worried. Even if I hear that voice again. Speaking of which, although most people on the internet think that Hachisha-sama is just a creative article, sometimes the source of creative inspiration is the vivid images from those who have real experiences. Even if Hachisha-sama does not exist, who knows that there is no such thing as what about the existence of mysterious creatures like Hachisha-sama?